What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our Week 11 NCAA football picks and preview. As always, I got Ty joining me here this week to break down this week's games. But before we do, we got to talk about last week and both of us going 7-3. What do you got to add here?
We got Michigan with the bias pick. I guess the real surprise is Texas A&M. Uh, I guess it looked like they found it against LSU, but you see the difference. One team prepared for Marcel Reed and the other didn't, and that was the difference. And South Carolina just absolutely dominated that second half. So yeah, a big change there in the SEC.
And I agree with you there. I mean, the thing that I took out of this week is that SMU is legit. Like this SMU football team, I get it was a home game and a big game in the ACC, but that big of a win on that stage and for conference bragging rights as well. Definitely watch out for those Mustangs. And then we'll talk about our locks as well. 3-3 yet again. I'm sure you don't even want to talk about those, so we'll just move on to the next one for you. And then this week, I'm going an under in the Michigan Indiana game. Iowa State, Kansas, I'm going the over in the points. I think that one's going to be a back and forth classic Big 12 game. I have Georgia covering 2.5 at Ole Miss, Colorado covering 4.5 at Texas Tech. And then I have Vandy plus 4.5 against South Carolina. Great home team, even with only like 30 fans in the stands still. Vandy somehow, some way plays really good at home. Then Oregon 23.5 against Maryland. I feel like that's a free bet.
Yeah, so I am not gonna lie here. I actually had 5 games I felt good about, not six. And that's why I threw in my team in Michigan here as the sixth game. I got them plus 14 and a half. That half is big though. The half makes a difference. But I do have Florida plus 22 and a half. I won't get into that too much because I know of certain Texas fans that I know closely are watching this. I got Georgia minus 2.5 at Ole Miss. I was surprised that line is so close. I know Ole Miss blew out Arkansas last week, but I still don't think they're quite ready to win a big game like this against the Georgia team. Texas Tech, I actually think they win that game outright at home against Colorado. They've been playing really well coming off that Iowa State win. BYU minus 3. I know that's a road rivalry game, but Utah is just not good this year. So I think they cover that one. And then Oregon minus 23 and a half. Same thing. Maryland, just not a good team. And Oregon's on a heater right now. I think they continue it.
Yeah, then we'll start with our first game, Miami, Georgia Tech. And, I think this could be a trap game for Miami going into Georgia Tech. Miami's, looking to keep their magical season going. But at the end of the day, who's got the better player on the field? It's like they say, we have Cam Ward and they don't. And I think yet again, that's the difference in this game.
Yeah, that's been their plan all year. If they can just be in the game in the fourth quarter, Miami is one of the better fourth quarter teams in the country. They just dominate the last 10 to 12 minutes of every game. I think that continues here. The lines seem small, but I mean, every game is close for them, it feels like. But yet they always come out on the winning end, and I think that continues.
Then moving to the 3:30 slate, I got to put my bias aside here. It worked last week, and I think it's going to work more magic this week. I'm going Indiana. As Michigan fans, I think it's kind of hard not to root for Indiana. Unless you're a Purdue fan, obviously. Indiana has been bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten football for what, since Michael Penix was there for 1 year, and then he got hurt, and then they derailed that season too. So what they're doing right now, 9-0, is magical. I expect them to win this game. I will be more shocked if Michigan wins this game. Indiana not covering at this point, I really think. And I think Indiana gets to double-digit wins, 10-0, and in the driver's seat for a chance at the college football playoff.
Yeah, I'm going the other way because I'm a sucker mostly, but I will say that Indiana's next game is the game everyone's been talking about for weeks. They go to Columbus. I know they have a bye before that, but this is still a classic look ahead game, their best start of all time, about to go into maybe their biggest game in school history against Ohio State. And people forget Michigan's beat Indiana like I think 27 of the last 28 or something like that. It's a crazy streak. And I know Michigan's 5-4, but they are on paper better than Indiana. If you just look at the talent, the composite rankings and all that, I know Indiana's coached 9 million times better than Michigan, but I'm going with the bias. I have my reasons, and we're going with Michigan to eke one out here on the road and stun Indiana.
If that's what makes you happy, we'll let you talk about that. Clemson, Virginia Tech. I think Clemson, they have to bounce back, right? I think it has to happen. This team, was really good, and then all of a sudden they just forgot how to play football there last week and or a week 2 weeks ago, and they got to win this game. 6.5 on the road, it's kind of concerning. It could be one of those games where Clemson, sets the tone early and they run away with this one in the second half, or they let them hang around and it's a 10-point maybe or less win. Hopefully, it'll be that first one where Clemson will just set the tone early, and often in Cade Klubnik has a big day.
Yeah, I think at full health, this would be a coin flip game almost for me. But Virginia Tech, Kyron Drones, their quarterback, and I believe their running back, Bashal Tootin, they were both out last week, and I don't know if they're going to play this week. So Virginia Tech not being at full strength and Clemson coming off that really embarrassing loss at home, I think they can bounce back this week because they were playing really well for 6 games after that Georgia game. So maybe last week was just a fluke, and we'll find out this week. But I think they get the road win and kind of get back on track.
And then also at 3:30, yeah, you're looking at that correctly. Kansas coming into the year expected to do big things, and they're 2-6, have to win out to even get to a bowl game. And I think the hope continues this week. Now, Iowa State, I get they just lost to Texas Tech at home, nonetheless. And I think there's a lot of emotions going through the Iowa State locker room right now. And Kansas has nothing to lose in this game. And, you classic Big 12, it's November now. And this is when the Big 12 gets crazy, and I think Kansas pulls off a huge upset.
Yeah, I was leaning Kansas, but this Kansas team gives me vibes from that 2021 Nebraska team. If anyone remembers them, they're regarded as the best 3-9 football team of all time. Lost like every game by a possession. That's Kansas this year. They've been in every game, but they can't finish. And at some point, it changes from a team is unlucky to they just can't finish games. And I think that's going to just be more of the same here. A 3-point spread. So that means it's going to be more than likely a one possession game late into the fourth quarter. And one of these teams just has been finishing games better than the other this year. So I'm going with Iowa State to get to 8-1.
Yeah, then another great game. This line's fallen a little bit. Army was favored by a touchdown. Now it's down to 4. I still like Army here on the road. Hopefully, their starting quarterback is fully healthy this week. Last week he missed due to an illness. But North Texas isn't a team to look over. They're in the American Conference. They're a team that could fly under the radar in that conference, make a run for the conference championship. But I think Army puts that hope to rest and they move to 9-0.
Yeah, if you just put aside the analysis, if you pick against an 8-0 Army team, you can't even call yourself an American at that point. You just can't do it. Army having one of their best seasons since they couldn't throw forward passes in football. That's when Army used to be really, really good. But 8-0 start, they are actually slinging the ball a little bit this year. And I think they're going to go into that Notre Dame game undefeated. And I hope and think that they'll put up a much better fight than Navy did against Notre Dame. So I think they get the win this week and start to set that game up.
Yeah, then I think 3:30 has the best slate we've seen in recent weeks here. Georgia, Ole Miss. Whoever wins this game keeps the SEC chances alive, I think, at least. I mean, 2 losses in the SEC. It's going to be a crazy last few weeks here, but I think Georgia's going to win, pretty much knock Ole Miss out of the chance to get to the SEC championship game. Not out of the playoff, but definitely the chance of the SEC championship. Georgia, as long as Carson Beck doesn't have a bad half of football, I really don't see Ole Miss really hanging around. I get Jackson Dart and Trey Harris are really good, but Georgia just has a complete team rather than some guys that have to carry the team.
Yeah, you did say the Carson Beck bad half could be in play. You know, he's thrown just countless interceptions this year, so that could be what gives Ole Miss an upset win. But it just seems like Georgia has been playing up and down to their competition all year. For the big games, they show up like they did in the second half against Alabama and in their dominant win over Texas. And now, you know, it's a big game, so that means you're going to get Georgia's absolute best. And I think that'll continue this week. I know Ole Miss just put up 63 on Arkansas. Jackson Dart threw for 500. But Georgia's not Arkansas. They're actually very different. And I think that Georgia defensive line will overwhelm Ole Miss.
Then at 4 o'clock, so probably you're going to be tuning in this one because it is going to be a close game late in the fourth. I'm going with the Buffs on the road. And I think it's going to be not a walk-off touchdown, but something pretty close to that for Colorado to win this game. Like you said, Texas Tech coming off of a huge win against Iowa State, keeping their hopes alive in the Big 12 as well. But Colorado, I just feel like this team has something magical there. You don't really see a lot about Dion Post anymore because this team's good. And the media loves to destroy them when they're not good, but they're good now. And not too many people are talking about this Buffalo team because of all the hype that's around them. And I think Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, this team keeps on rolling.
Yeah, people are kind of overlooking this game, I think, because this actually has a lot of playoff implications on the line. This game, both of these teams are very much alive in the Big 12 race. This game could actually even determine who gets a first round bye in the playoff. I just think Texas Tech has been playing some of the best football of anyone in that conference, if not the best, coming off that huge upset win at Iowa State last week. So obviously Colorado much improved. It's not as much picking against them as just riding the hot streak of Texas Tech right now. And I think they get to 7-3 and start to put themselves really in the mix here in the Big 12.
Yeah, and talking about being in the mix, this is that perfect game as well, like you're kind of saying there, except it's an SEC version. South Carolina, Vanderbilt. Vandy, obviously magical run this year. What they are doing this year, no one saw coming. I want to say kind of the same for South Carolina. This team's flying under the radar in the SEC because there's so many top-heavy teams. But this is a huge game. Whoever wins this stays in the SEC race. And, a lot of teams still got to play each other. Georgia-Tennessee game still is a factor. And, whoever keeps on winning, these teams with two or three losses in the SEC, if they win out, they might as well end up in an SEC championship game. So, with that being said, I am going to go Vandy at home. They almost beat Texas at home. Obviously, South Carolina is a little weaker opponent than Texas at this point in the season, but don't overlook South Carolina because they are also a very good team at this point.
Yeah, I think this game has way bigger implications than anyone thought it would. I thought most people probably thought you would flip the records, and that's what we'd be looking at with these two teams at this point. But South Carolina going on the road after a huge win, which can be really tough. Look back to last week. They had a team doing that exact same thing in Texas A&M. So they know exactly what can happen in that situation. And I don't think that was as much of a fluke as it may have seemed. I think South Carolina is actually a really good football team. Very good quarterback play, good defense. So I think even going on the road to a tough environment now, I still think they can come out of there with a tight win.
Then moving to tonight, the nightcap is going to be great for the SEC and college football. Alabama, LSU. And you know what Feinbaum said? Of course, if Bama loses, they're done. Their chances are over. I don't think that's the case here. I think LSU has more to lose than Alabama at this point in the season because, well, Alabama lost to Vandy, obviously, but they still beat Georgia. And I think that Georgia win is going to keep them in the hunt, win or lose this game. Obviously, I'm going to have them lose. But LSU at home, at night, Baton Rouge, the Bayou, that place is going to be rocking. And don't forget about Brian Kelly. This guy knows how to coach in these big games, but now he's finally got a whole talented roster to do so.
Yeah, this does. I know it's technically not, but it feels like an elimination game for both teams because, Alabama could maybe sneak back in, but they would need a lot to go their way. So this is a huge game for both of these teams. I just think we saw LSU, whether it was because they weren't prepared is up for debate, but they got torched by a running quarterback in Marcel Reed 2 weeks ago. And I don't think it's crazy to say that Jalen Milroe is quite a bit better than Marcel Reed. So I think that could be tough on their defense. And Garrett Nussmeier, on the other hand, just looked awful in that second half against A&M. Went from looking like a first-round pick to a high school quarterback in that game. It was just weird. So maybe that was a fluke, maybe not. But I just think that Alabama defense is going to overwhelm him like Texas A&M did. And I think Alabama actually wins fairly comfortably. I think it'll be 2 scores.
And then an 8 bounce back week for Pitt is what I have happening here. Last week didn't show up. Now you get a home game against an okay opponent in the ACC. But I think Pitt is going to put those fraud rumors to rest here with a good win.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a perfect bounce back opportunity. I will say that line, when you look at it, it feels so small that you almost want to bet Virginia. It's like a Vegas knows something kind of thing. But I do think Pitt, 7-1 still have everything in front of them, really. If they get to 11-1, they will have a chance to potentially play in the ACC championship, play for a playoff berth. So they still have a lot to play for, and I think they'll show that this week in a bounce back home win.
And then the last game, BYU, Utah. Obviously, I'm going with the Cougars here, keep the undefeated season alive. But like you said, we don't know still 8 games through the season if this Utah team is good and they just can't play in the fourth quarter, or if Utah is just bad. And I think I'm going towards the bad side because, they all were expecting Cam Rising to be fully healthy this whole year. Yet again, another injury, and that kind of derails the whole season. Now, I'm not sure why they didn't prepare for something like that to happen because it looks kind of like just a crapshoot at this point for Utah. And if that's the case, I'm going with the team that's better coached at this point in the season in BYU.
Yeah, I think I fairly know what's going on with Utah. I think they are just bad. I had faith in them. I've actually picked them a couple times this year. I had them as my Big 12 champion to start the year. And, I know losing Cam Rising is not any small deal, but the way it's just taken their whole season down has been a tough watch. So I think even in a close rivalry spread here on the road, night game, it's going to be a tough environment for BYU. But Utah's just not good right now. There's no way around it. And, people thought UCF was going to beat BYU. They were favored in that game. BYU dominated them. I don't think it'll be quite like that, but I do think they'll win comfortably here and get to 9-0.
Yeah, that's going to be it for this week's picks. Come back next week to see how we did, and we break down the biggest games next week. But until next time, the Bench Buddies are out.